So as we continue to move out of a post-COVID world here in the United States, we are faced with a problem that has plagued churches for all of human history, but even more so now, and that is how do we engage people who are attending church less? And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to give you 7 ways to impact and engage infrequent church attendees.
Thanks for joining us again today on Practical Church Planting. Today we're going to be giving you 7 ways to engage infrequent church attendees.
And real quick, before we get into that, if you are launching your church in 2 years or less, be sure to check out our Growing Your Launch Team course, practicalplanting.com/launch. You'll get a practical, workable plan of how to actually gather people, what events to plan for, how fundraising, what to do with social media. We've been there, we planted a New City Church, and there's a lot of just generalities of here's what you're supposed to do, but they don't actually tell you how to do it. That's what the course is for, practicalplanting.com/launch. It's super practical, just like this podcast.
That's right.
And just like today,
we're all about.
7 ways to engage infrequent church attendees. Of course, this has always been a problem.
Yes.
Coming out of COVID, it's even more of a problem. My anecdotal, observation is people, you have the committed people that are going to come most all the weeks anyway, and so that doesn't, people do that. But everyone else, it's like a week less. Like the twice a month is like once a month. The once a month's like every 5 weeks. Like I've just noticed now, I think it's part of it, we're recording this in the summer, and, so there is some of that, going on, and people making up for lost time. Last summer couldn't go anywhere. And so, I expect it, in the fall to be a little bit, maybe not summer-esque, but people are used to it. Not only did people get into new habits, but they just have the flexibility more than ever before. So, if so many people working from home, for example, if they want to make a weekend trip, they'd have to wait till Friday at 5 to leave. If they're working from home, they can leave Thursday.
That's right.
Or whatever. And so, they can stay even longer. And so it's not just that I would argue it's not just that people care less about going to church. It's just that they have more mobility and flexibility with their jobs than they had even 18 months ago.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's part of it. And so what you'll see us talking about here is this is not I don't know. I always think about this the other day. Like if I wasn't a pastor and I, love Jesus and wanted to follow him, my habits would be different too. It's easy for us to judge people because this is our job. And so we're used to being here, but it is interesting to step back and think, okay, if I was a committed follower of Jesus and I did make involvement in my local church a priority, but I had more flexibility, would my weekend habits look a little different? Yeah. I think for all of us it would be.
I think they would.
Now, I'm not saying you would only come once a week.
Yeah.
Like I still think you would have that priority of I'm going to be here, but if you have some more flexibility and you're involved in the church in other ways, which we'll talk about, you might not attend quite as often. And so how do we do this? And the culture in which we live in, instead of being mad and complaining and playing the victim and just getting mad at people for not coming, how do we just address where we're at?
Right.
And that's what this episode is for. So, number 1, I don't know if this is the most effective, but it's one of the most effective.
Pretty high.
And that is to get them serving.
Yep.
Here's what we have found, that even the people that are a lot more infrequent, when they serve, they show up. And they are pretty consistent. Yeah. And we even have some people who only show up when they serve. Yep. And so if they never served, they never would come. And so, just like totally honest with you, we have a guy who serves at New City Church who's, got a lot of questions about his faith and kind of honestly is really just completely disengaged. Yep. Doesn't go to his group anymore. And, but he still serves. Yeah. And I don't know why. And we've talked. It's a lot of his friends are his community here, and we've had conversations like, hey, we're not going to treat you differently or whatever, but he comes when he serves. Yeah. I don't know why he serves, but he shows up. And so one of the best things you can do is get people serving and, finding different ways. We have different episodes about that as well, but not feeling bad about asking for it because people will show up when they serve. And of course, if they show up when they serve, that means they're showing up somewhat regularly. Yep. So they're more likely to meet people, have conversations with people, get to know people, and want to come when the weeks that they're not serving. And so again, this is anecdotal coming out of COVID, but the people who are even more infrequent are still pretty consistent when they're scheduled to serve. Now, if you ask people to serve every week, this isn't going to work for you. Yeah, different story. For us, we ask people to serve once or twice a month for the most part. And so, and we plan in advance. They have an idea of when they're serving. And so they still show up. And so if you want to engage people, get them serving.
Yeah, I think there's a whole number of reasons why this is a good kind of solution. But people, I mean, people don't like to let people down.
Yep.
You know, people want to feel like they're a part of the church and things like that, and especially if they've been a church person for a long time. Which I think we're more likely to get kind of long-term church people to get a little more comfortable post-COVID with their infrequency, just because it's something they've done for a long time, and so they know. Like, I don't know. I think for a newer believer, they're more likely to be more regular, because it's new to them, and so forth. But for someone who's been in church for a long time, they know that they're making an impact when they serve. Assuming you've done a semi-decent job at casting vision and explaining to them why they're serving, people want to help. And so I think scheduling people to serve, that they're going to be much more likely to come, not just because they're going to hear the service or because, I mean, there's a whole number of reasons, but I think that people want to help, and especially post-COVID, I think more people want to help than potentially before, because they see more. In most cases, I think, see more of a need than they did before, whether that's because of lower attendance or whatever the issue is. And so, getting people to serve, I think, is a great way to get people that are infrequent to at least be semi-frequent. Not going to solve every issue, but I think it'll help them get back in the building a little bit more, and it just helps them feel like they're part of the team again.
Yeah. Again, for us, this is not like we want people to come to church because that's just the best thing ever and we want to feel better about ourselves. Mm-hmm. But obviously, we think it's really important. Like, really, we think the Sunday gathering is very important, and it leads to a lot of other things. So getting people to serve. Now, if they serve in kids and you only have one service and they only come when they serve in kids, that's not ideal.
Yeah. Yep.
Better than nothing, but hopefully you might have a conversation of encouraging people to come, to the service as well. Or maybe having them serve somewhere else where they can go to the service if that's the only reason they're going to come.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we'd all agree, obviously, we don't want someone coming just when they serve. Like, we want them coming more, but especially in the case you mentioned earlier of someone who's really questioning and kind of pretty much walked away from their faith, but still coming to serve. I'd love for him to come to service and just sit in service. Yeah. But when he serves, he still hears it. Like, I'd much rather that than nothing. So it's like, yes, it's not the perfect solution. And if someone just comes when they serve, that's not ideal, but it's way better than the alternative of not coming at all.
Yep. And again, it's not just about the service itself, it's about the community, the people they see, the friends, so they're more likely to do things maybe outside of Sunday and be around other believers. So all to say, getting people to serve, getting them signed up to serve is a great way, because people will show up when they serve, which means they're more likely to come and you can engage with them. Number 2, have a quality live stream. Now, this is, let me qualify this, as quality as you can. Mm-hmm. Not spending, $50,000 if you don't have it, but the whole just throw up a video, which was okay for COVID if you didn't have anything, that's just not working anymore. I mean, we talked about this even before COVID. We were never against live stream, but it's not neutral. Mm-hmm. Like, if it looks bad, sounds bad, if your camera angle is weird, if you have it set up where you can only see a few chairs and nobody ever sits in those chairs, it looks like nobody's there. Yeah. Like, it's not a neutral thing. It's either good or bad. And again, now as you watch TV, news, everything's back to normal. Mm-hmm. The whole, it's so great being at everyone's houses was not a thing. Nope. Now, if you're a celebrity for a while, fine, because people care. But for the rest of us, nobody cares. And so you got to spend some money. You got to be wise, and you don't want to overspend, but you got to invest in it in some way. And so, as quality a live stream as you can produce, you should. And also, that being said, the most important part of your live stream is your sermon. Because we talked about the previous episode, we talked about YouTube, so go back and listen to it. All these, practical YouTube tips that you can actually implement today. What we recommend is, if you do live stream, you do want to cut the sermon out and then upload the sermon on its own later, because nobody cares to watch the whole service unless they're watching it live. They don't want to, and honestly, unless you're a big mega church, your production quality, sound, lights isn't going to be amazing probably for their worship. They just want to watch the sermon. So you need to do the sermon only. That's what you should put on your website. And so, for us, for example, we have 2 cameras. Our sermon camera is really good, and we call it the worship camera, is not that good. We have to do 2 angles of it because of our auditorium and where the camera is. We want to do a straight-on shot that's about eye level to the person who's preaching, and so during the worship, people are kind of blocking the view of the stage, so we have to do a sermon camera that's a little bit higher up, so that quality is not as good. But we focus on the sermon, not just because the sermon's like the best thing, but online, people want to watch that. Mm-hmm. And so if you only have one camera or whatever, what you want to do is make sure, you got to take other elements into consideration, but the sermon needs to be the primary focus of your live stream, because that's what you're going to take to upload the sermon with later. Yeah. And so have it be as quality as you can. If you can add lower thirds, that's fine. If you can adjust the worship as best you can, but just throwing up an iPhone and recording it and being like, well, people understand. New people don't understand. They just see a bad quality thing. And they might understand you're a church, you don't have a lot of money, but because everyone's online now, it's probably, for most of us, there's a lot of churches in your area, they'll just find something else.
Mm-hmm. And I would even say your regular attenders, they might understand in a sense of they understand that you can't afford more.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean they're going to watch it if they're not there. Like if the audio is really difficult to hear, if it's hard to watch, they may understand like, yes, we understand this is the best you can do, even though I don't know that's the case. But they may understand that aspect, but that doesn't mean that they're going to sit through it. Right. So I think sometimes we have this kind of false sense of everyone will get why we're doing it this way, and everyone will be okay with it when no one's mad about it, but it's ineffective. Like it's almost pointless to put it up. And so when talking about like live stream quality, it's a little bit difficult because I've been kind of checking out like Sunday afternoons, Mondays, some newer churches that I know, just like clicking through and looking at what live stream looks like. And I know when we were starting off, our live stream was bad. Like,
well, we didn't, and then we did it, and we realized it was so bad, so we stopped.
Exactly. So there was a period when it was really bad before, and then we stopped for a year, 2 years, I don't know, a long time. But so I get like you have to start somewhere, and so I don't want it to be like you have to get everything perfect before you start anything. But I think there are a few things that I see often that are very easily avoidable. Things like going live while you're still adjusting the camera. Like I see that a lot, and that's just something that you should get it set before you press record, film live, whatever you end up doing. This one's not as easy, but like the thing that matters more than literally anything else is your audio quality. Like there's been so many that I watch on a computer, on my phone, that I crank it all the way up and I can't hear what they're saying because it's in the back of the room and it's echoey and they're just recording room noise, and like I literally can't make out what the preacher is saying, in which case obviously there's no reason to watch it. So obviously that one's a little bit more involved. You probably have to go through your board and hook that to either your phone or your camera. But there are things where I would say everyone has to start somewhere. It's not going to be perfect when you start, and you should start. But there are certain things where if you can't figure these things out, it's better to not do it. Yep. Like if your audio quality is so bad that nobody can hear what you're saying, then it's not, we've said this before, it's not a neutral thing, it's a detractor. If someone sees that online, they're actively going to avoid you or avoid the church, And so there's just a few things you need to kind of figure out before you go live, but it doesn't need to be this thousands of dollars worth of equipment figure out, but you need to make sure it's watchable. Yeah,
I was just looking up our previous episodes. It's episode 208 of how to improve your live stream. And again, this is practical church planting. So for church plants, smaller churches, not a lot of budget money. That's what you should listen to, episode 208, to improve it. Because it's not neutral. And I think sometimes what Brian says is a good point. It doesn't need to be perfect, and you'll get better as you do it. So it's okay. It's okay too if you have some weeks where it's not great, with the intentionality of, hey, we're trying to improve this, not just like throw it and not look at it. Yep. But I think one of the downsides is we assume, well, I'm just going to throw up my service, I'm just going to live stream it because it's going to attract more people, and it won't do that. Yep. So if you want to live stream to attract more people when your live stream is bad, it's not going to do that, so there's not really a point. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, if you want to reach people who can't come, that's fine. It's another discussion. But what I just see a lot of is just we got to get the live stream on there because if people will see it, they'll come to our church. And it's just not going to do that. A poor quality live stream is not going to do that.
And I would even say, even if you just are using it for the aspect of people who can't come, like we're pretty much out of COVID, but if you have people that are still worried, whatever, that you want to put it up in case someone's watching from home and can't come that Sunday or they're on vacation, whatever. Even if they're the most faithful, honestly, I go to church here. If I'm out of town and I tune in and I can't hear our live stream, if the quality is so poor, I'm not going to watch. People are not going to tune in just because it's their church home if it's unwatchable, which sounds a little bit mean, I get. But if it's something that they are struggling to hear, if it's something that they can't see what's going on, they may love the church, but they're going to take that Sunday off. Yep. And so it's not worth doing. If it's not worth doing, if you can't get kind of the basics of sound, a little bit of video quality, but mainly just sound to make sure they can hear it and it's not just looking like a mess.
Yep. So episode 208, go listen to that if you haven't. Second point is have a quality as you can live stream, because that will engage infrequent church tenders, because if they engage that, they're, you're staying in front of them, they're seeing what's going on, they're more likely to be thinking about you and come back because they want to do that. So have a quality live stream. It can help when people are away. Number 3, be proactive with your groups, small groups, community groups, life groups, cell groups, circle groups.
Missional communities?
Missional community groups, all the groups.
All the groups.
Whatever you call them. This, I was looking at this. One of our most listened to episodes for this year was our first one. Do you remember what it was? 2021 church predictions.
Oh, really?
I was like,
that's hilarious.
I don't know
I gotta
why.
go back and listen to what they were. I don't even remember.
One of the predictions was about how more people would be in groups than maybe on a Sunday morning. And we have found that to be true. I mean, very closely in terms of adults.
Yeah.
If you take kids out of it, we've kind of got to the point where, and again, not everybody goes to group every week, but the number of people in groups, and we track attendance with our groups, so like we have a good idea, is almost the same. We've got a good amount. I always thought of, you'd hear some of these bigger churches, whatever, talk about how like they have as many people in groups as they do on Sunday morning, and I've always been like, really?
Do you though?
But that's kind of been true for us lately. Yeah. And again, this is about engaging infrequent church attendees, because if they're a part of a group, they're going to be connected with the church, and they're more likely to come when they're here. Again, going back to what we said in the beginning, people are traveling more. Maybe they're making up for lost time. Habits are changed, and we could maybe disagree with them all we want. But, in some cases, it's easier to be consistent at a group than it is on a Sunday morning, because it's the weekend, and most groups meet during the week, and people are in town during the week more than they are on the weekend. And so having a way to get people involved. Now I don't look it up here. We have so many. I always feel bad saying this, but if you really want to do this, look back at our episodes. We have episodes on how we do our groups and how we structure them. So we won't get into all of that here, but this is a great time to do groups, start groups. I'll say this: if you're starting out and you want to have more than one group, it can be really hard. What we did, we launched in April, so our first summer we did what we called dinners for six, where we just had 3 couples or 6 people, singles, whatever. Some of them ended up being 8, doesn't really matter. And for once a month, over 3 months, they would go to each person's house and have dinner or just go out to eat. And there was no Bible study, there was no prep, it was just getting people together. And then in the fall, we started community groups for the first time, and we had like 4 or 5. Yeah. We would have had 1. Maybe 2 if we had done that, because they already knew each other, so it wasn't weird. And so whatever that looks like, you got to be proactive about putting people in groups and connect people to groups, because they might not be here as much on Sundays, but if they're part of the church community, they're still going to be connected and involved.
Yeah, here's the thing: we're if you're listening to this, most of us are probably smaller churches, and you kind of don't have as much of the issue of people getting sort of lost in the crowd as you do at a bigger church, where people can. Where people don't really notice if somebody doesn't show up, but people notice if someone doesn't show up, especially to a group, and people know that. And so, I think you have that. And obviously, this isn't a sense of we want people to join groups so they can be guilted into going. But if you have sort of a responsible group leader and someone's not showing up frequently, they would be reaching out to them and hopefully be in communication with them. And so there's not the sense of they can just stop showing up and nobody notices. They have someone who's kind of helping keep them accountable. So if they're showing up to group, or if there's something going on in their life, and kind of helping them through that. Where if someone's just kind of a church attendee, they can stop coming. And most likely, most of our churches, someone would notice. I'm not saying no one would notice, but it's less likely someone would necessarily reach out outside of maybe planter, pastor, but someone in the church would reach out and find out what's going on, because you notice a lot more when someone doesn't show up to your house than you do on a Sunday morning. And so I think it really helps, and it helps them just stay engaged with what's going on in the church. If they miss Sunday, we do it we do sermon-based small groups. You can go back to the episode and listen, but it's all based on the sermon. So if they miss Sunday, they can still engage in what happened on Sunday in their group. So they're still consuming similar content and not missing out on something completely by missing Sunday.
Yeah. So be proactive with groups as best you can. We've got other various episodes on how to do that, but that's the way to keep people engaged. Number 4 is social media and YouTube, or put another way, your online engagement. Now, a couple of free things for you. We've done quite a few episodes on social media. They're typically some of our higher downloaded ones. The first one we did was episode 3, I think. It's still because it's one of the earliest ones. It's one of our most downloaded episodes a couple years ago, but I would repeat all the stuff we said there. Yeah. Also, if you go to our website, practicalplanting.com, we have a church planter's guide to social media, which, just like our course, but this is free, and it's just a PDF. We tell you what to post, how to post, where to get graphics, and where to get posts if you can't think of stuff to do yourself. So you can just go to our website, put in your email address, and we'll send it right to you. That's practicalplanning.com. But you need to have social media. It needs to be a priority. We talk about this all the time. There needs to be some money involved. If you want to keep people engaged, they're not here as much. You want to stay in front of your people so that they can then remember you and be thinking about you and remind them of things. You should use it. We won't get into all of how to do it here. We have so many resources on this. But it needs to be frequent and consistent. It doesn't have to be all churchy things. A lot of the just fun things that people can post about and debate about, that's fun as well. For YouTube, again, our previous episode, we talk about things that you can do to drastically improve your YouTube channel, and it's not hyperbole. It's
it's true.
things that we've done recently and don't take as much effort as I thought. I really wish we'd done it sooner. But it needs to be consistent. And so whatever that looks like for you, whatever platforms that you're on, there needs to be some time and effort. You'll find the thing that frustrates me about it is like, I'm not a social media expert, and for now, I'm the one that does our social media here at New City. It takes me, and again, I've been doing it for a while, so it's fine. It takes me an hour. It takes me an hour on Thursday.
A week.
Now, again, the posts to like, if they can't be scheduled, like sometimes they can't for various reasons, but most of them are all scheduled.
Yeah.
And just following up with like comments and stuff like that, maybe 2 hours. I mean, I don't know, but like the actual planning takes an hour. And again, if you get our resource, we talk about, like, we use Sunday Social. There's various ones you can use. So we have some of our own content, and then you can pay like $15 a month to get other stuff, and you can mix it all in there.
Yeah.
And so we have posts like almost every day. We do stuff on YouTube, which again, go to our last episode to listen to that. And all of that is to engage with people, to keep it in front of people. And it is funny to me. We have some people who hardly ever come, who like comment on our stuff all the time.
Yes.
And I think it's helpful for them too, because when they do come, they don't feel as awkward. Because we all know if we haven't been somewhere for a while, it's like, is it weird that I'm back? I haven't talked to anybody.
Yep.
But if they're engaging with you online and connect with you online, even if they're not commenting, they don't feel as disconnected. So although maybe they haven't been in 2 months and they decide to come on a Sunday morning, it's like, oh, I've been watching, I've been seeing this stuff online. To them, it's not awkward, which is the point. Because if you feel awkward, you're a lot less likely to come. And so engaged with people online throughout the week is a great thing, not just for them, but also just psychologically for them to be like, oh, I'm still connected here. It's not going to be weird if I show up.
Yeah, man, I hope in this like day and age, this isn't new information, but I follow a lot of churches, and I think sometimes it is. And so, like, I think we don't, like, it's the old church strategy of giving someone a mug, which we talked about a few weeks or a few episodes ago, which we're pretty anti of giving someone a mug with your like information or church branding on it. But the old like theory behind that is you want to stay in front of your people. You want someone to open their.
To be clear, anti like a new guest gift. Like if they go to your church, they might like a mug.
Well, sure,
but like as like, hey, give me your Connect card, I'll give you my church swag. New people don't care about your church swag.
Yes, and the old like theory behind it is you open your cabinet and you see the church, and so it's on your mind every day, which is not a very effective solution. But that's what social media does in a much more effective way.
Yeah,
like we can fight about it all day long and wish that people weren't on their phones as much and wish social media was not the way it is, but it is where people are, and so you can engage people where they are for, I mean, very, very little money.
Yeah.
And so this is something that if it will like it, gosh, I don't know. I can't stress enough. Like just doing a little bit on social media will do so much more to keep you in front of people that are infrequent than anything else you're going to come up with.
So many of the things that we spend time and hours and energy on that don't do anything.
Yes. Like it'll be way more effective than making sure you have your live stream good. Like if you have a great live stream that you post on YouTube, but every other social media channel is silent, pointless. Like, I mean, maybe but in my opinion, pointless compared to the others. And so make sure this is a priority, and this will keep your people engaged. Like, I think we all want to have this idea that every Sunday morning, everyone has this like, this wrestle in their own mind of like, should I go to church or not? But I think a lot of our people that are infrequent, it's not an issue every week for them. Like it's not a thought if they have other plans. And so this is a way to keep you in front of them every day, because look, if you post every day, people are going to see it every day. People are on it all the time. And so if you're frequent on it, people are going to see it all the time. And it's going to be one extra thing kind of in your pocket to keep the church, not yourself, but keep the church in front of people that are a little bit more infrequent.
And one thing to remember too is if you're working on consistent social media use, again, our episodes, our website, even the Practical Church Planning, or if you're on Facebook, joining the Practical Church Planning Facebook group, people talk about that stuff in there as well. I don't want you to assume, well, if I post every day, then I'm going to get 50 likes and 37 comments. So what I see is people try, they don't get a ton of engagement, and so they stop. It's a long game. And again, because of how the algorithms work, not everything, a lot of the stuff that you post don't end up in front of people. And so if you only post once a week and it only shows up to 10% of the people who like your Facebook page, for example, well, your chance of getting in front of people is really small. And so doing more posts gives you more chances to engage with people. And so it needs to be a priority. If it's overwhelming to you, check out our resources. But you got to start somewhere. It's just like your live stream's not gonna be perfect right away. But if you want to engage people instead of being mad, like, hey, they don't ever show up on Sunday, but you don't do anything, throughout the week to give them a reason to, then you can get mad at them. But we have the tools to do stuff, so we should try to take advantage of that.
Yep.
So that's number 4. Number 5. Now this one might not seem as obvious, or maybe it is as obvious, but we can forget about it often. And that's this: don't complain to or guilt your people to come to church more often. It's just not effective.
Not effective.
We've recently, 2 episodes ago, I think it was, we had an episode on 7, or 3 episodes, I don't know, 7 ineffective preaching phrases. So one of the things we could do is, like, when we try to guilt or condemn people to act a certain way, instead of, conviction, yes, challenge, yes, but in a way of like, you should do this. I can't believe you're not doing this. Well, when we talk to people like that, immediately they withdraw. They start to justify what they do. They start to get like, well, who are you to tell me? And so I think this can happen the same way about church stuff. Again, it should be something that we care about, but not everyone is super spiritually mature. People have struggles. They have other things going on. And so this episode is not excusing people from making faith a priority. This episode is, we got to meet people where they are and try to engage them and help them grow spiritually. So when we tell people, when we say things like, people need to come more often, or I can't believe you guys aren't here, or you need to make this a priority, it's just not going to work. Now, there's nothing wrong with like maybe having one-on-one conversations and you're discipling someone or you're challenging someone or you're talking about this, but I'm talking about from stage or from groups of people. It's different when you're complaining to your pastor friend about it, obviously, but like telling people in your church that they should come more or else. I still remember this. The church has kind of closed down, I think, right around the time we launched. But, before we launched, I'm trying to look up what all these church plants are doing. How can I learn from whatever? And I found this church here that was a smaller church, and I just like clicked on one of their sermons, and I happened to like click through right what he was telling his people, because they were struggling. People weren't coming. He was like, you guys need to be here on Sunday. Like, how is this church going to grow if you don't tell your friends to come and if you're not here yourself? And I remember I'm thinking like, ooh. And the church, closed. Obviously, that wasn't the primary reason. And I get the desire to want to do that. But if you're guilting people to show up, it's going to be do the exact opposite thing. What you should do is some of the other things we talked about. What you shouldn't do is complain or guilt people, because that will do the opposite of engaging people and encouraging them to attend.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough line, because I think that we would agree that that there are situations where you should be honest and talk to someone if they're infrequent or maybe still using something like COVID as an excuse when you know that it shouldn't be. Things like that. Like, there are situations where you should have one-on-one conversations potentially, but I think you need to examine those before you do. In other words, like, make sure that it is appropriate to have, and that you're coming at it from a place of love, and that you care about them, and not from a place of guilt. Because I think that can be. I think when we can very quickly kind of make that a gray area of, we have this idea of, we know it's best for them to come every week. We know it's best for them to engage, but we come at people as attacking because they're not engaging, which isn't good, which isn't obviously what we want to do. And so, saying things in a group setting, or complaining to someone else in the church about someone else, even if you're not using name, just kind of complaining in general about people that aren't showing up. It's even if you're complaining to someone who's currently showing up about people that aren't, like, that's not people don't, this sounds mean, but like, people in your church don't want to hear you complain about your church. Like, you should have outlets, you should have other pastors or people you can speak with. Like, people who are attending don't want to hear you sound like you're miserable about the church that they're attending with you, And so that's just not, there are appropriate outlets, and that's just not one of them. And so being careful who you're talking to about these things, but also when you do need to have these conversations, making sure you're approaching them from the aspect of hearing out their side of the story, if that's kind of the case of what it is, and listening more than just attacking them for not showing up on Sunday.
Yep. So don't complain or guilt people. It's not going to help, and it's going to do the exact opposite. Number 6. Now, this, depending on your personality and your wiring, may be more natural or exciting than not, but it's still something we should all try to maybe put our minds around or think about. View it as an opportunity, not a problem. So view people's attending habits changing as an opportunity and not a problem. Now, you could say it is a problem. Okay, sure. I mean, yeah,
Yep.
but it is what it is. And so, what can we do instead of guilting people to try to engage people more? Now, it's hard for me because I love innovation and trying new things and doing new things to engage people. Like I'm all about that. Part of me though gets a little tense and uneasy about all these like conversations about the church needs to innovate and try new things. And I get that because culture changes. But I think sometimes we can make innovation like this idle, this unattainable thing when a lot of the stuff we do is effective. It just, you got to be faithful. Like a weekly a weekly gathering is a good thing. We don't need to innovate to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Like preaching is a good thing, doing it well. You want to get better. So you don't want to like innovate out of that. You want to innovate in terms of maybe a worship service looks different than it did 50 years ago, looks different today than it does, in another part of the world or even another part of the country. So, but I don't want, when I say like we need to try, when I hear innovation, sometimes it's like this, we need to like completely do church differently. And I'm like, there are things that we can try to do differently, but we don't need to do everything differently. We just need to do it in a contextual way.
Yep.
And so when I say view it as an opportunity, not a problem, I'm not saying you need to change everything you're doing, but there are some things that we might, on top of the normal things that we do, try to adjust or try differently. So I don't know if that distinction makes sense. We're not tearing everything down, but we are changing some things. And so view it as an opportunity. So YouTube, something that we've been focusing on here a lot at New City. Again, if you want to see an example of a church that's not a mega church that's doing things that you could do, go to New City RDU on YouTube. That's our YouTube channel, and just see what we do. You can even subscribe so you can as we try new things, as we're experimenting, you can find, a church like that or a church that you could actually, emulate. But view it as an opportunity. So maybe there's different ways of serving or different types of groups or something that you could do that you haven't done before. But instead of being like, well, this stinks, there's nothing we can do about it. What can we do to engage people, where they're at?
Yeah. I think it's easy to say like, yes, I view it as an opportunity, not a problem, but it's harder to live it out. And so I agree with what you're saying. Like I've heard someone say, I don't remember how they exactly phrased it, but essentially churches can innovate themselves to death. Like especially, I think this is especially a bigger problem with like younger church planners and things. Like we can think, we want to do things different than the church than our sending church maybe, or church we grew up in or whatever. And so we're going to kind of just like revamp everything. We're going to do things totally different. We're going to turn church upside down, whatever. And like, it just, it doesn't need to happen. Like, and so it is a fine line to walk because things should be innovated sometimes. Like we've definitely done things throughout the years that were different.
Yeah.
And some, honestly, like looking back, some we shouldn't have and some we should have. And so it's not saying like just do things the way they've always been done, but it's not saying change for the sake of change. Like that, you have to find that line of, does something need to be changed? If so, then change it in a responsible and effective way. But if it doesn't need to be changed, like if people are being infrequent and you look at some of your things and like, hey, our Sunday morning, like, okay, I'll give you an example for us. Like our attendance we haven't reached pre-COVID numbers yet. And so it would be easier for us to look at our Sunday morning service and think, man, things really need to change because we're having new people come, but maybe not as frequent, whatever. But if we sit back and look, and this isn't like a tooting our own horn thing, but like our Sunday morning service is really good. It's not like the most perfect thing in the world, but for our size, for our resources, for who we have, it's a really good service. And so it'd be easier for us to see it as a problem of we haven't hit pre-COVID numbers and think we just need to change things. We need to innovate. We need to do something completely different. But that's not the problem. I'm not saying like there is a specific problem necessarily, but the Sunday morning experience isn't necessarily what's causing people not to rejoin church.
Right.
And so you could innovate out of the things that you're actually doing well. And so you got to look at those things with kind of an objective eye and see what's working and what isn't, and carefully innovate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. For us, I mean, it's not perfect, but for the church of our size, resources, Sunday morning isn't the reason people are not coming back. I mean, it's culture changes, and so, just whatever. There's other reasons, and so we're trying to find ways outside of revamping all Sunday morning, because it doesn't need to be revamped to engage people. It's really, I can't help but laugh, and I don't mean anything negative by this, but through Acts 29, through this podcast, I get a chance to talk to a lot of church planners, and I love to do it. But there's a common theme that I see often among young church planners, and I felt the same tension too of, we're going to do something different, and we want to reach different people, and we want these type of people to come to our church, and not those type of people come to our church, and I get that, and so we talk, and then I see, they start doing their Sunday gatherings or whatever, and they're doing whatever other church does. And so I'm like, I try to try to tell people like, yeah, you should be innovative and think of it, but don't act like you're going to do something new because you're not doing anything new. Like it's really easy to theorize until you actually have to do it. So I just think it's funny. I have these conversations of like, we're going to reach this type of person and we're going to do church differently. And then they have an acoustic guitar, a couple of songs, and a 45-minute sermon, which is longer than they should actually preach. And the bill, like it's like you're. So instead of like pretending you're not going to do that, do that as best you can, and then try to find other ways to engage people.
Yeah. So, and I mean, we're specifically talking about infrequent church attendees. Like for most of us, yes, obviously, like there are cases where preaching may be a big detractor.
Yeah.
Like, there may things
you should be as good as you can at get resources.
Exactly. The music, whatever, may be a big detractor. Like there may be things you do need to work on, but I just kind of a blanket statement. This isn't applicable to everybody, but for the most part, I don't think the issue with infrequent attendees is your Sunday morning service is just that bad. You know, blanket statement. That's not the case for everybody.
I might even say with that, it might be for your preaching ability, your number of people, and your resources. It might be as good as it's going to be for now.
Yeah.
So that's changing. It's not what's going to change this.
Exactly. And so I think it's figuring out that's why we're talking about these other things. Like nothing we're saying is be a better preacher. Like that's. Maybe you need to be. I'm not saying no, but like that's most likely not the issue of what's causing people to be infrequent. And so you have to look at other things, not kind of just the obvious.
Yeah. And we have we've done this so long. So for those of you that are committed, we have episodes on how to do like service flow and all that sort of thing to help improve it. But all that to say, it's the mindset of here's the culture we're facing. What can I do view this as an opportunity instead of a problem, and it might help you engage people better.
Yep.
So number 7, last but not least, and this is very important. We talk about preaching and all those sort of things, but especially with engaging infrequent church attendees, I'd say this: always assume that many people, not just one, but depending on how many people you have, maybe 25%. So if you're 50 people, 100 people, 25 people, assume at least 25%. Probably higher though, depending. The more people you have, the higher the percentage that is. Haven't been to a single week of your sermon series. Assume many people haven't been to a single week of your sermon series. Now, if you're preaching through 30 weeks of a book, then maybe they've come every once in a while. But still, so what this means is you tell people where, if you're in the book of, we're starting Mark in August, always remind people, hey, where they can find it. It's the third, it's in the New Testament, about 2/3 away from your Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke. Again, people who don't know anything might need a little bit more information than that, but at least they feel like, oh, not everybody knows exactly where this is. If it takes me a second to find it, it's okay. Re-mentioning the characters that you talk about often. Again, you're not going to do a recap every week, but you're saying things like, hey, if you were here last week or a couple weeks ago, you will remember. Or this part may not make as much sense to you if you weren't here. That's okay. Like for us, we're about to do Ruth starting this week for a couple weeks and then go into Mark. And Ruth is... there's a lot of cultural differences that you could spend a long time explaining each week, which we're not going to do. So I will be saying things like, encourage you to listen every week if you're not here. When we get to some stuff that we talked about the previous week, I'm just going to say, hey, we talked about this last week. Or like the first time, I think it's, in Ruth, I forget. Gosh, I don't know. That's not a downside, but when you're ahead, you forget what chapters are what or whatever. But I think it's in Ruth 1. I don't know, where the first sign of like, you have to marry your brother-in-law. That was the custom as like a redeemer or whatever for a widow, and like that's weird. Yeah. And so I'm going to say we're actually going to talk about this in Ruth 2. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today because it's going to come up every single chapter. So I'm going to keep going, and so it's okay to say things like that, to say, hey, if you weren't here, you're going to miss out, or you might not understand, and letting people know. That's okay, because, hey, I expected that you weren't going to be here every week. Yep. So all that I say doesn't make people feel bad. So repeating things, saying, hey, you might have missed, or if you were here, those type of phrases are easy to forget to say, but they're also easy to interject, and they don't take away from people that have been every week. Like people that have been there every week, like they're not like, well, people should be here every week. They get it. And again, if they want to invite their friends, saying phrases like, remind people where they are in the Bible, or a quick recap of who this person is or what happened, or saying you may have missed this, or saying things like, we talked about this in that preaching episode recently, but we all know where this is in the Bible, or as we all know, or you probably know, like avoiding those phrases and just assuming people have no context. So again, if they don't have any context and you're in a sermon series for a while, there are things they're not going to understand, and that is okay. But every once in a while, having phrases that kind of say, hey, we know that not all of you have been here every week will make them feel a lot more comfortable and less awkward when they do show up.
Yeah, this is the one of the, maybe the only one of the kind of tips, advice that we're giving here, that like everything is, how do you get people to be less infrequent? And this is what happens when those infrequent people actually show. Because like you don't want them to feel lost, clearly. Like none of us want that. But I mean, but we can't change everything for the person that's showing up infrequently. So I think the advice you're giving is really good. Like especially if you're preaching through books of the Bible, like to give a little bit of context every week so that no one feels lost, but not so much that you're boring everyone who's there every week. Like if you're going through one of the New Testament letters, like explaining, for taking a minute, minute and a half of like, this is who Paul is, this is who he's writing to, this is why we read these letters. Like you don't need to give a whole historic background. You don't need to recap every week leading up to where you are, but giving them some context so that they at least can follow along and they don't feel like it was a waste of time showing up. So like I'm glad you brought up Ruth. Like we're starting Ruth this coming week from when we're recording, and it's a narrative. So there's you really have to hear the whole thing. Like you don't have to, but it's very beneficial to hear the whole thing. Where some other books, obviously, you can kind of show up at any time and you can pretty much get the picture. But we kind of talked about this yesterday as we were going through kind of I think it was the last sermon of Ruth as we were talking through it, that we can't give everyone all the context leading up to Ruth 4 on the last week. Like if that's the first week they show up, they're going to miss out. They can go back and listen. Hopefully they do, but they're not going to get everything. However, we can still address it. We can still tell them, like, this is a little bit of what's going on. If you really want the context, go back and listen, because there's a lot going on here. And not just assume that they either know, or if they don't know, then just be okay with them being lost. So you can kind of couch it a little bit and give them a little bit of context, but without boring everybody else.
And it also helps them not get stuck on things that are confusing. Like if you say, hey, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, granted, they don't know what you said, but if it's like a controversial thing or a thing that's like really different than our culture. So again, like if you're a widow and your husband dies and you have no kids, like marrying a next of kin, that's really weird.
Yeah.
And so by saying, hey, we talked about this previous weeks, go back and listen. Now there's a good chance they won't go back and listen.
Sure.
But in their mind, you're not avoiding something that's weird. If this is their only week, they're gonna be like, why didn't you mention this? Like, this is weird. So they'll be like, okay, I don't understand. I'm probably not going to go back and listen to it, but at least I know they're not trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
That can really help. So again, just saying stuff like that. And it's okay that people don't know. You want to engage people best you can, but if they've missed out on some things, the opposite of not doing any sort of recap is doing like 5 or 7 minutes. Like there's a podcast that I really enjoy. It's a weekly podcast, and they do long recaps. Although recently they've changed that. Maybe they've got enough complaints. They do like 5 to 10 minute recaps. They do like multiple. The best way to think of it is like sermon series. So they do topics for long weeks at a time, and it's just like I'm clicking through. And I'm missing stuff, and I'm like, I don't need a 10-minute recap. Just get me to what you're talking about. And so 7 minutes is too long. 5 minutes every week is too long, because people are going to be like, oh, we got to sit through this again. I mean, literally a minute or less. People will miss out on some things, and that's okay. At least it gives them the opportunity to say, hey, you're not going to know everything. Here are the main ideas. Most of it will still make sense to them. So that's the good part. And just letting them know it's okay that you missed this. It makes them not feel as bad. Makes them might want to continue to come so that they don't miss out things like this in the future. But if you just preach like everyone knows everything, they're not going to know. They're going to feel bad, or they're just going to disengage.
Yeah, I mean, and part of our responsibility as someone who preaches is being able to communicate to someone, even if they haven't been there all the time. Like it's like we're not going to give them. They're not going to get all the information. It's not as good as if they were to hear the entire book if you're preaching through a book. But if you're preaching in a way that if they show up one week and they can't follow along, that's an issue on you. Like that's not an issue that, yes, they need to be more frequent, but if it's so disengaging, if you haven't heard the entire thing, like if you can't really explain these concepts in a really quick and succinct way, and you have to hear the entire book, then that's a preaching issue. Then that's something that you need to kind of figure out. But for the most part, if you kind of just give a little bit of a kind of introduction when you're starting off, and as you get to kind of topics that have been covered previously that you can't continue to cover every week, address that they've been covered previously. That's good. Like you don't need to like. I think we can overthink this a lot. Like that's good. You're giving a little bit of context. You're helping people feel like they aren't wasting their time being there, even if they haven't heard anything. But you're not taking up an entire chunk of this sermon catching everybody up, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. So always assume many people haven't been to a single week of your sermon series. That'll help you engage infrequent church attendees. So hopefully this episode was helpful. Again, resources we've talked about, thepracticalplanning.com/launch is our growing your launch team. If you want the social media guide, just go to practicalplanning.com. You can put in your email address. Our YouTube channel, New City RDU, if you want to see how we've done some YouTube stuff. Yep. And then if you're on Facebook, you can join the Practical Church Planning Facebook group. I think it's over 1,100 people part of it right now, and so people are posting every day. It's really helpful and encouraging. And if you have questions, post them in there. People will be able to help you out no matter what you might be facing. So thanks for listening, and we'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting.